Welcome back and happy new year. Happy 2025. Welcome back to LotTalk powered by Lotpop. My name is Chris Keene. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined by my great friends, John Anderson and Ronaldo Leonard. Gentlemen, we are going to kick off episode 11, but the first episode of 2025 in a way that I hope every dealer tunes in, and the dealers that tune in, send it all to your friends because we're starting with acquisition this year. Anderson, buddy, 2024, how much did we hear about acquisition?
Well, first of all, Happy New Year, gentlemen.
Happy New Year, brother.
New year.
Yeah. No, Chris, to your point, that was, if it wasn't the number one topic, it was 1A, 1B, right?
Sure.
That's something that I think, every dealer has a question about, struggles with, wants to dig deeper on, right? And so I'm really excited about today to ask a couple questions and that dealers have asked us over the year, right? Of how, how we can help them get better at sourcing inventory, right? So yeah, it's definitely at the top of the list, brother.
Oh, there's no doubt. Ronaldo, with you training all of our new dealers and our existing dealers, I mean, how many times have you been training on our lot stock platform?
Oh, countless times. And I always get the question, how can I buy better? Because I always bring out the old mantra that the money's made on the buy. And, when we get into that part of the training program where we're talking about bucket management and how important it is to get out of the gate strong, the question always comes up. And so we're always looking for insights like we're going to share today to help dealers kind of change their thought process and their processes in general to make sure that acquisition piece of the puzzle, they have a solve for it to get out of the gate strong. And there's no more important time to do it for those dealers that are looking to change to get better results than they've seen in 24 to get them in the right track for 25. So, I mean, it's where it all starts. And so it's the utmost importance. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I guess I want to make sure that everybody that's listening, everybody that's tuned in realizes, 6 months ago when this idea was birthed by John Anderson, on one of our co-hosts here, who is our chief experience officer and executive vice president here at Lotpop, the idea behind this was for us to be able to grab, insights from the hundreds and thousands of calls that our team has with our dealer partners out there each and every day, and the things that are giving them challenges. We want to bring that out to the forefront and give as much back to our automotive community. Hey, here's some challenges. Here's some ways that we've found to overcome those challenges. But another piece that we've committed to do is find like-minded partners out there like Frank Knox, who we're going to be bringing on stage here momentarily from Unique Auto Solutions, but finding those other like-minded business partners out there in our community that is willing to help give back something that has been given to us so generously over the years. So this is pretty darn exciting. John, there's no doubt about it. If we were all back in a dealership today, you would be that old man, that grumpy old man that was doing all the acquisition. You were that grumpy old man that had his run list put together and his rulers and his highlighters and his bidder badge slapped on the back of his NADA book. You were that guy running around the dealership asking people, what'd you sell last week? We've got to restock that. So Ronaldo, we
Get
drove
off my
around
lawn.
other lots.
Get off my lawn.
But you know what, though? We needed that grumpy old man because that grumpy old man kept us in between the lines, with making sure that what we did acquire was at least at the best of the abilities that we had back in those days. And, there was a systematic approach, if you will. Hell, even in the way that you guys remember that, I'm going to start in Dallas this week. Then I'm going to fly my way over to Orlando. Then I'm going to go up to Minneapolis and then make my way back home. And we're going to buy 5 truckloads. They had a very systematic approach about it. Mm-hmm. But we think about today's time and all the resources we have. I mean, Ronaldo, you hear it. How many times does a dealer say, I've signed up with this, that, or another? I don't even know how the hell to use it.
I hear it every day, every day. And a matter of fact, last week, I think it was New Year's Eve, I sat down with a dealer to help him get his business plan together and his run searches for Stockwave, because they're looking to expand the circle of dealer or auctions that they're going to. And it's like the first episode that we had, and we talked about all the technological advances that help us do all of the things that the grumpy old men would sit in the back room with all of their charts and graphs and abacuses and everything else they could get their hands on. But because the process is so important, and because of the fact that you've got so many venues that you can acquire vehicles from, um, sometimes we're just in a position where we're doing less with more when it comes to the information, comes to the data, and we just got to dial it in, be specific, and it goes back to the biggest objective that we have when we partner with dealers is to get them to the point where they're stocking what they're selling and selling what they're stocking, but having that information in front of them and available to them readily every single day, so that when they do, whether they're hopping on Southwest or whether they're doing it on simulcast or just using the static auctions, they're laser focused on bringing in the inventory that they're having success with.
I'm interested really to delve into a little bit about the different opportunities that we have as dealers today to source inventory, right? Because Chris, to your point earlier, this all started with our CEO, Jason Rice, right? Giving back to dealers, right? I mean, how many countless videos are in the vault of him?
Oh my gosh.
Basically putting out there what we do as a company, right? I mean, there's no hidden secrets, right? And so, I think that's one of the strong points, and we've always been modeled after him to give back, right? And then on top of that, as we've grown our dealer partnerships, right, how much information do we garner or get across the country that we're able to share with our dealer partners, so that it keeps them at the cutting edge, right, of what guys are doing. And I think this is an opportunity today to find out some of those cutting edge things that are happening out there for sourcing, because it is such a struggle. And I'll tell you something that surprises me is the old curmudgeon in the room, right? Is you talked about the old days, and I think about how resourceful we had to be in the old days, right? We didn't have everything at our fingertips. We didn't have everything on a computer, right? So we had to be resourceful. And in a lot of ways, I think that's where we've been hurt a little bit by the technology, right? I'm astonished sometimes when I ask guys about, the areas that they're sourcing inventory from. What are you guys doing right now? And I hear, very limited options, right? One or two things, right? And so I'm really interested today for us to delve in a little bit for those out there listening and watching. There are a lot of good ideas to source inventory from. Obviously auction, right? But what other areas, right? So that'll be something I'm interested to delve into a little bit
Let's
today.
find out. From Unique Auto Solutions, Mr. All Great Big Hurt Frank Knox. How are you, my friend? Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Good morning. Appreciate it. Absolutely. Always excited to be here and talk with you gents, you good looking gents. Well, except for Chris with that scar, but
Yeah, the horseshoe's something else. Frank, we caught you on the fly last time. And thank you again for jumping in at literally. I shot Frank a text to listeners and said, "Hey Frank, can you join this call real quick?" And he jumped on with this. He was so gracious to give us that time. But thank you a ton, Frank, for doing that. We wanted to bring you back in because, as you were backstage, you heard a lot of the challenges that we're facing, a lot of things that we're hearing from dealers. But before we do that, so that way our listeners that are listening in on the podcast, or our viewers that are watching us on YouTube right now, Give us a little bit of your background, Frank Knox, and a little bit of why Unique Auto Solutions was developed. Give us that, Frank.
Yeah, absolutely. So appreciate it, guys. My background is pretty simple. I spent, 17 and a half years at CarMax, all of that time in the acquisition space. From there, I was recruited to go to Off Lease Only. Off Lease Only being one of the largest independent dealers in the Southeast, and manage their entire acquisition team there, whether it was in the store or at auction. While I was with CarMax, I got to be a part of a number of projects, all of those things built around just acquiring inventory. So as I left Off Lease Only, Justin Campbell and I talked, who is the owner of Unique Auto Sales, and we wanted to put together something that would really help dealers with the thing that was the most pressing, and that's acquisitions. And what we heard time and time again was that dealers just didn't have the bandwidth to spend the necessary time to go out and acquire inventory. So we thought, what if we could put together a team of experts that could go out and help them acquire that inventory at any given time? And that team would be well versed on any platform to buy cars. And so that's really how the idea was born, is really to help support dealers around the country acquire that inventory.
Oh, I love it, because I promise you, there's not enough dealers that have leaned into the resources like you guys over at Unique Auto Solutions. So, that being said, with that ability for you guys to have that bandwidth, we grabbed some questions from a lot of our different performance engineers that get these questions from the hundreds of calls that they do each and every week. I'd like to throw some of these questions at you, Frank, and I know John has some, Ronaldo has some, but kind of let's get the party kicked off of what we're hearing from the actual dealer partner that is experiencing these challenges. So one of the questions that came in, service lane, how would you begin? Is it one person, a team? And then what information do you provide the service customer? How do you do the evaluation? And is it an automated follow-up process with that service customer, or is it a one-on-one type follow-up?
I think that's a great question. I think the first thing is it's really a team of individuals, because you need to have everyone in your organization bought into service drive acquisitions for that program to work. Your service managers, your service advisors, your sales consultants, everyone's got to be bought into the process. So it has to be a team effort. The thing that I would recommend is, there's any number of companies out there that you can absolutely lean on for service drive acquisitions, to assist you with building out that playbook. I know, I've spoken with Brian Kramer, who he has a group. I've spoken with Auto Acquire, which is an up and coming company that has a great group of people. KBB ICO. I mean, you go down the list, and there's any number of organizations out there that are really focused on service drive acquisitions and giving you the playbook and helping to support you with your training and development efforts for that service drive. I prefer, it should be an automated process. And this is something that, you absolutely should be able to put a value on every car that's coming through your service drive. And you want to make sure that those values, that the values make sense, that it's not an offer that really deters someone from wanting to sell their car. So you need to be able to set dials to make sure that this value makes sense for my store and what I'm prepared to pay for a car. And it's a real value. And then from there, the follow-up piece is the most meaningful. I was talking to folks over at Auto Acquire, and they have a follow-up process that really focuses on a continuous process of 30, 60, 90, 120 days out. They're still following up with that customer, because that customer who comes in the service drive, you hit them with an offer. Well, they weren't prepared to sell right now, but maybe 120 days, they probably are, right? 150 days, they might be. So you need to make sure that you have some sort of repetition that consistently is going and following up with that customer and tracking the offer. I thought CarMax or Carvana did something that was ingenious when they came out with, hey, we're going to tell you what your car is worth constantly, right? More and more people are jumping on board with that because what we've figured out is that customer, they're not going to sell their car today, but if I keep consistently talking to them about selling their car, at some point I'm going to be top of mind to acquire that piece of inventory.
And we had a
Right.
lot of conversations, you and I, with various dealers around that service drive piece. Anything you took from that just resonated with you to make sure we emphasize with the dealers?
Yeah, big time. And it's the time frame. The time frame. I mean, how many deals? I'm not just look. Frank blew it out of the park with that. Led me right to not only acquisition but inventory and lead management. We can say that about. I mean, how many times do we give up on opportunities prematurely, right? And so I loved. I loved hearing about the time frame, continuing to follow up, continue to talk to customers over that 60, 90, 120 days, right? We always I think we have a tendency sometimes to put our stamp on things, right? What we would do, right? And when we do that, we have a tendency to cut things short and not understand what the voice of the customer is actually out there in the marketplace. So when I heard Frank say that, spot on, man, is hanging in there with those customers longer, not giving up on them in 21 days, 30 days, 60 days, right? We keep digging.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Frank, I want to throw this next question at you because it really ties back into the first one, as I'm sure they're all going to tie in together. But the question that was posed was, I have stores that have struggled to see consistent results from their acquisition team. They eventually lose focus and give up. How would you compensate an acquisition team? And how do you measure the number of appraisals? How many appraisals should be completed daily? I know you're going to crush this one here. Bring it to us, Frank.
So, when you think about how many appraisals should be completed on a daily basis, the first question that I ask any store is how many customers came into your building, right? That's the first question. Because if a customer walks through your building and they don't have an appraisal, I want to know why, right? When I was back at CarMax, one of the very first things I learned, and this is going back to 03, 04 when I started there, right? The very first thing we talked about was appraisal effectiveness. How many appraisals are being done based on the number of customers that come into your building? Period. And so we would track that number. And that number should be for CarMax, that number was around 70% of customers that walk through the front door should automatically get an appraisal. Now think about that for a second. CarMax, the one store that I was in that I ended up going back there to run that store as the purchasing manager later, that store on a Saturday would see 200 to 300 customers walk through the front door in Schaumburg, Illinois. 200 to 300 customers. We would do 150 to 200 appraisals on a Saturday. And we would buy about a third of those appraisals. So now you think about that and how you keep the motor running, right? How do you keep that motor running? Well, you have to have the appraisals. It has to be a cultural shift. And I've spoken about this where it has to be a paradigm shift in every dealership. Every dealer, the very first thing that should be asked of any customer, in my opinion, when you come through, because acquisitions are so important and we continue to talk about acquisitions on a regular basis now, the very first question isn't, are you here to buy a car or what car can I show you? It is, what car can I appraise for you? What did you drive here today? How do I get the keys for that car and go appraise that car? So when you talk about that and then you talk about compensation on top of that, it's no secret that CarMax recognized something that was really great about acquisitions and that it was the foundation of who we wanted to be as an organization. And so buyers at that organization were salaried. There was no version of, hey, well, you're only paid on the cars that you buy, or you're paid on your look to book, or you're paid. No. We're going to pay you a salary to go out and execute this playbook. Now, I recognize that dealerships, they can't necessarily do that, but you absolutely can reward your acquisition team on every single car that they purchase. I asked a dealer, I'll give you an example of this. I asked a dealer not too long ago how much they would pay a buyer to go out and buy them a piece of inventory. And the number that I got from them was, well, I pay my wholesalers $500. Great. What do you pay your buyers in the store if they buy an appraisal? Or what do you pay your sales consultants or your service drive, your service advisor? It wasn't $500. And the question we should be asking ourselves is, why isn't it? Because we know that car that I buy direct from a consumer is more profitable, turns faster, and is a better car than what I find off site. But I'm not willing to invest the money to buy that car and give that money to my staff in-house, but I'll pay a wholesaler that same amount. So, when you think about the compensation, I can't say what makes sense for each store, but I will say that if you're paying your wholesale group a number, that number should be the same that you're willing to pay, if not more, what you're willing to pay somebody in-house to buy a car direct from the consumer.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Love it.
Preach.
Mhm.
Preach.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah,
Goodness gracious,
that's
man.
absolutely spot
That
on.
is fire. Yeah. Yeah. Two things that you brought up so far, Frank, that I really I love and want to applaud you for bringing to the table, and then want you to kind of dig into it a little bit deeper. The first was the model that Carvana has brought to the market, where they're consistently staying on top of those appraisals that they've done in the past to plant those seeds constantly to that consumer that this is what your car's worth now. This is what we'd love to pay you for it. When you were in the store, you talked about, I guess, 2004, 2005. Was that something that you were doing at that time? Or is this something that's just kind of come in and morphed out of what
Yeah,
Carvana
that's a great
started to
question.
do?
So, I just left the store probably about a year ago, a little over a year now, from being in the stores and actively managing an organization. And so I think back to, back in those days, no, we didn't, it wasn't something that was even, top of mind. Our appraisals were good for 7 days. And so we always kept record of an appraisal. We always knew that, hey, if this customer came back into the store, we knew that they had their car appraised 6 months ago, and we can look at what the value was 6 months ago. But it wasn't something that was necessarily repetitive. It was, if they came back, we knew that they were there. The same thing would apply when I was at Off Lease Only. We knew when the customer came back in, and we could track when the customer was in and what the value was. But this piece that has come on the scene, look, you think about it in this way, like, so many people out there, they love Redfin and some of the websites out there that give them a number always for what their home value is, right? So why wouldn't we do that with your second largest investment that most people will make in their life is their car? Why would we not do that as an industry for that piece of that asset that customers have? So I think it's, again, it's ingenious that Carvana came out with it. I think other companies will follow suit with that. Again, I'll bring them up again. I was talking to a guy named Chris over at Auto Acquire. They've put that in their software as well. And I think it's going to continue to catch up. The more and more people that have a value for their car, the more and more people that are going to sell their car, especially when they see, in my opinion, it creates this sense of urgency, right? Like, you see that car value start to drop, and all of a sudden it ticks up a little bit, and you're like, oh man, my value was dropping and now it's worth more. I got to go sell, right? It's great marketing.
Right. Absolutely. And you brought up the fact that, I mean, we've always grown up in the industry thinking that the car purchase was going to be the second largest purchase that anybody ever made in their lifetime. But as we see what's going on in real estate and the housing market, for a lot of people, it's going to be the greatest purchase or the
You're
largest
right.
purchase that they make. Yeah. And so, yeah, I am 100% on board with making sure that we do follow up with these folks because it's all about impressions. It's just like, with our prospects that are buying vehicles, we need to take that same mindset when it comes to acquisition and keeping front of mind as they're going through that process and deciding on what
That's
they're
right.
gonna buy or what they're gonna
Mhm.
sell their vehicle for and who they're gonna sell it to. The second thing that I wanted to touch on was on the service drive and the number of appraisals that you were doing. A lot of dealers are kind of resting on the digital side of it and people submitting, the information on their vehicles and then giving them a number through digital retailing or through that avenue. How does that play into what we're doing with everybody who walks through the door and converting those folks that have submitted information digitally to get a number on the vehicle that they're looking for? What's a ratio or a reasonable ratio that dealers can expect? Digital appraisals and
Yeah,
on-site
that
appraisals.
that's a tough one, because more time than not, what's happening now is the customer who did the digital appraisal, they're showing up in the store, and so there's this omni-channel feel to everything that it just needs to all flow together. And so, I mean, I guess when you look at that, I would say, I would really expect, I don't know if and this is just spitballing, but I would expect 15 to 1 digital appraisals versus in-store appraisal because more people are more comfortable, especially in this with this generation, the newer generation, right? Like I think about my daughter, she's 25. She would just as soon not talk to anybody if she could get away with it. She would rather do it all through
Right.
technology. And so when you think about that, like when you think about the play that technology has in our industry, I think that's only going to grow in time. And so we have to be comfortable with the consumer using technology and us reinforcing that they should use that technology to help them arrive at an offer.
Right, right. So let's take that a little step further because we've seen on the retail side, as customers are starting their buying journey, th- if I remember correctly, the number was probably 80% of people would take that digital journey all the way through the process. Yet when they got to the dealership, wanted to go back to square one and have that experience inside of the dealership, that we all love and enjoy
Well,
so much. How do you
no,
see
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what was that? How would you see that playing out in this scenario? Um, Catering to those people who want to begin the journey digitally, but yet finish it up and have that experiential texture, to completing the transaction and a dealer having the opportunity to be successful when it comes to acquiring vehicles
So,
directly from consumers.
so I think it's a great question, and it really comes down to the process. It has to be a seamless and simple process where there's zero friction, right? So when if I start a process at home and I come into the store and then I go back home, there should be no friction in that process whatsoever. And what I see more times than
Absolutely.
not
Yeah.
is that the process started online, but the store hasn't any idea what's going on with that customer when they show up, right? Or they
Right.
start the process of selling their car online only to get to the store and hear that, well, no, that value, that's not the true value of the car, right? Well, what do you mean? I sent you the
Right.
pictures, I sent you everything. There's nothing different about my car than when I did it at home than when I came here, but you're telling me the value is different. We've got to do better as an industry with embracing that that new culture that, and look, I can do my appraisal at home. There is technology, right? Like several companies have the technology for you to walk around the car and scan the car and just get the offer. So because
Right.
that's the piece that most customers that I've experienced most customers get upset is when they show up to the dealership and the value has now significantly changed. And we can't
Yeah. Oh
explain
yeah.
why it's changed. We have no explanation
Hmm.
for the customer, or the explanation that we give the customer doesn't necessarily make sense.
Right. Right. I mean, and that's something we've experienced in the business for years because of sometimes that market is
Yeah,
just volatile.
we live in a
And
world
so, yeah,
now where everything, and I love that I got my start at CarMax, because at CarMax I only knew transparency. That was the end. That was
right.
what we lived and breathed, was that we were going to make the most transparent
Right.
process for the customer. And now we're in that world as an entire dealership organization, as an entire industry has become more and more transparent, and we still have there, dare I say, there's dealers that still are holding on to, well, you know what? I don't have to be transparent. The customer doesn't know
Right.
everything just yet. No, they do, because they already have 3 or 4
Yep.
offers that they already got on their vehicle before they showed up to your location,
Absolutely.
right? Or they're in your
Yep.
showroom
Oh
and
yeah.
they're plugging in their car into CarMax, Carvana, and whoever else may have a widget on their website. They're plugging it in. And even to that point, Ronaldo, I've had customers that have plugged a
Mhm.
car in into the dealership that they're standing in as the used car manager is handing them the offer, and they're going, "Wait a minute, this is on your website. So why is your
Look
number
right
different and
here.
I'm standing right here?" So
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So just to kind of wrap up the conversations that I've had with my dealers over the last few weeks, your biggest suggestion would first of all be everybody gets a number. Everybody should be followed up with. There should be that transparency and it should be a seamless process.
110%.
Did that did I
No,
miss anything?
that pretty much nails it.
Dude. Oh my goodness. My goodness. Yeah, I hear the organ going in the background, and the choir's getting ready.
Yeah.
We just need to pass an offering plate now that John's back in the room. He's going to be a biggest contributor.
No, that's good.
Take it away, Papa.
That's good stuff. Hey, Frank,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about, um, and this is just from my experience with some of our dealer partners talking about this process. Can you talk a little bit about your days with CarMax and just your time on the acquisition side about the process? So a customer is on our showroom floor, and we want to do an appraisal. Can you talk about that process? What's that look like? Does do we just do a out the window? I see your car sitting out there, and we put a number together, or what does that process look like from that point?
Yeah, so great question. One, I'll start with, the process for CarMax, and for even for off lease only, because I took a lot of what I learned at CarMax and took to off lease only as we started to build our own appraisal lane. And one of the things that we have to take a step back and recognize is that the acquisition process starts with knowing that it's not just appraisal lane; it's a full blown buy center that we're talking about, and that process looks very similar to when I go to the auction. If I'm walking cars off site, it looks very similar to the same process that I'm doing when I'm in the store doing an appraisal. Now, it may be streamlined when I'm off site, but the reality is that it's the same process. And that is this. Every single customer that walks in, that sales consultant, when I was there, walked the customer right back out the door. Didn't matter if it was raining, snowing, sun, it didn't matter. We walked the customer back out to their car so that sales consultant could walk the customer around the car really quick. oh, Mr. Customer, I'm going to build you up. I'm going to tell you how great your car is. We're going to take a little bit of a note of, hey, there's a couple scratches, whatever the case may be. And I'm going to pass that information on to my expert, my buyer inside, my used car manager inside. I'm going to pass this on, and they're going to come out and they're going to get your appraisal started. Now, we did not take the customer with on the actual appraisal, but that customer was with the sales consultant enough to where they felt comfortable that, hey, this is a professional process. Once that was done, buyer came out, buyer did their walk around. And when I say when they did their walk around, we had this ironed out step by step, and it was over 25 steps. And some of them were as simple as you start at the driver's car door, open the door, look at the sticker in the jam, write down the VIN, compare that to the VIN on the dash, right? Like we wanted to make it bulletproof. And so when you could look and you could see that, all of a sudden now you had the customer who could be watching from the showroom window, seeing that every single car out there for appraisal is going through the same process. There was no discrimination, no matter if you came in with a $200,000 Ferrari or a $200 Focus, you were getting the same appraisal process, right? From there, all of that information was captured and then taken inside. And then that's when the research started. There was no, oh, you know what? I took a look at your car and I think it's worth $12,000. No, we were going in, we were going to pull up the auction data, we were going to pull up all of the information, Carfax, Auto Check. We were going to make sure that our value lined up with what that car truly, truly was worth based on what those cars were doing at auction, right? And then we would go and present that number to the customer. But there was a 25 or so step process to actually appraising a car, from how do you do a walk around on the car, how many times you drop a knee and look under that car, how many times, what kind of test drive you were going to do on that car, how do you bump stop to check the transmission on the car. If you had an issue, were you taking that car back into the shop to partner with your technicians who knew the minute an appraisal pulled in the back to drop what they were doing, because it was more important for us to get that appraisal than it was for them to continue working on the car that they were already working on. We had one shot to capture that appraisal and own that car. We already owned the car you were working on. So even from the technician, down, they knew that they had to embrace this process. And then the other piece, and this came on later in my journey with CarMax, but plugging the car into a scanner every single time, right? Like, grab those codes on the car. Understand what it is that you're appraising so that you can put an accurate value on that car without leaving yourself exposed.
Man, Frank, that's great stuff. And that got listeners, folks that are watching this podcast, I want you to seriously think about what Frank just went through from the start. When the customer walks in the showroom floor, salesperson takes them right back out to the car. And then there's a system in place for every step of that. And it's consistency, and it's professional. And yes, it's to the point. But I think we've gotten so far away from that. And a lot of it was the success we've had that has, a lot of times success breeds complacency. And when you hear about that process that's done without fail, time and time again, that's the type of thing that if you're a small dealer, if you're a large dealer, if you're saying to yourself, we don't have the bandwidth to pull this off, then get help, because it's so important. Reach out to Frank. I mean, it's just so important that process is in place, and that system that he talked about each and every time. It's absolutely going to win you more vehicles without question, because you're giving the customer a professional process, and they see it and they understand it. The other thing too, Frank, I get another question in with you here. Sourcing opportunities. And I know I mentioned that early on, but I kind of wanted to ask you this question, because I feel like a lot of times when I'm talking to our dealer partners, it's very limited in what I get limited is probably not the right word. I think they struggle a little bit of, um, you know, where the sourcing opportunities can come from. We've already discussed service drive, right? You already talked about, which I 100% agree with, is everybody that walks through that door. Uh, and I'll even take it further. Uh, and I was always trained this way. Everybody that walks through that door deserves to get something on paper, right? Because to your point, right, an appraisal. Listen, Mr. Customer, I know you might just have started your process today, but let us take a look at your vehicle. At least you know where we're at as far as what we're willing to give you for your vehicle today, right? And everybody gets on paper. Are there some other areas from a sourcing standpoint? I'll start it. When I was running a dealership, I just happened to look at the competitive set in Viato and saw some dealers that had their inventory that they had for 100+ days. And I reached out to them and said, "Hey, would you be interested in selling that car?" And out of that, I developed some relationships, and it actually got to a point where they knew I was buying inventory. And at the end of each month, a couple of dealers would send me a list of cars they wanted to get rid of. And I was able to pick from that. So from a sourcing standpoint, are there some other areas that you would encourage dealers? Hey, don't just get hung up on auction only. Here's some, and obviously the service drive is a great idea, but here's some other opportunities
Yeah,
for you.
it's funny you say that, John, because the last project that I worked on when I was at CarMax was Max Offer. That was my last project. It was a bit of my baby, and it was exactly what you're describing, right? Hey, there's dealers that need to get rid of aged inventory. Well, what if we bought that car instead of buying it at auction, right? And so Max Offer was
Right.
born out of that, and now it's a nationwide program buying, I don't know, 100,000 cars a year, through from other dealers, right? With not ever setting foot in the auction, right? And again, you think about it, the time I've been gone. I've been gone about a year and a half, or I'm sorry, 3 years, 3.5 years from CarMax. In that time, they've built that up to acquire 100,000 cars a year from other
Wow.
dealers. So you're right. There are other avenues, and so I think it starts with this. So when I start throwing things out there, and I think about the sources that are out there, and there's ACV, there's Edge Pipeline, which is your dealer's auction, your America's Auto Auction. There's Turn Automotive. There's Smart Auction. There's KBBICO. There is Direct from Rental. There's a rental car list that are out there. There's source after source, and then now you stack on top of that. Well, but Frank, you said that the appraisal lane and the service drive are my most important. Well, yes, again, shameless plug. That's why unique auto sourcing was born as one of our solutions, because we recognize that dealers need to spend their time in the appraisal lane and on the service drive. So why go spend your time at the auction if you have another resource that can help you with doing that? Because there's not enough time in the day to be able to manage the appraisal lane, manage your service drive acquisitions, manage your instant offer platform, and then sit and watch all of the cars at the auction, right? Like all of a sudden now you just run out of time. So how do we help support dealers with understanding that, yeah, there are all these sources out there, but where do I go find the cars? And this is something that I think, when you talk about Lotwalk, that does a fantastic job of building that, that predictor, right? And showing, hey, here are the cars that you need, but I'm sure you guys here, well, but I can't find those cars. Well, you can't find the cars maybe because you're not looking at all of the right places. So how do we help you to look in all of the right places so that we build value in the Lot Walk program that says, hey, you absolutely need that, AT4 and not just the base model pickup. You need the AT4 because that's what's selling. However, I can't find them. Well, you know what? Put this on a list so that someone can go out there and find it for you. And so I think there's so many places, and this is the thing that I was, towards the end of last year that I kept sort of preaching, was that as we talked about acquisitions, and you heard over and over again, direct from consumer, the piece that was left out is exactly what John and I spent countless months, years doing. And that was building our list, going to the auction, understanding our daily acquisition rate that we needed to buy this many cars every single day. And I needed to be at this auction to do it. And I needed to bid on 100 cars really to get 10, right? So it was all of that got lost, I think, as we talked about direct from consumer, that, as we go into 2025, we need to embrace some of those old school philosophies of saying, hey, the auction is not necessarily the enemy. The enemy is not having a strategy and not having a good plan.
That's fantastic, and not having multiple
That's right.
sources, right? So, yeah, just relying on one. So, and I I loved I loved hearing you say looking daily, right? So many times uh, we see Ronaldo. I think you can speak to this loudly, right? So many times we see a dealer that'll have a massive weekend, right? Um, and they'll sell 20 or 30 units, and then the following week they go out and they just absolutely load up, as opposed to that consistent day in and day out, right? And you just don't think about the downline issues that creates. Right now, we've clogged up our service department, we've clogged up our detail department, and then it's just the turn time gets pushed out there so far. And so I'd love to hear you reference that daily strategy. That's
Yeah.
so important. I know you see it, Ronaldo, with when you're training dealers initially.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it kind of goes back to, Frank mentioned getting back to basics and running a household. You never go to the grocery store when you're hungry because you end up with a lot of stuff in your cart that you don't
100%.
need. And you do the same thing when we talk about going to buy at the auction. You had a big weekend and you just gorge yourself and you end up as you're unstocking your basket.
That's right.
What am I going to do with that? Why in the world is this coming here? You know? And so, I mean, it just all goes back to just being disciplined
Yeah.
and methodical and putting together the list that you need and, uh, and not being the guy who's getting, bid up against the Coke machine because you got to go back with something.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. There are
Yep.
no bad there are no bad cars. It's just bad strategy, in my opinion. And that's what it really comes down to. A rental
Amen.
Yep.
car has its place if you have the right strategy for that rental car. Right.
Amen.
When the dealer says, I had a 20 car weekend, and then they pick up that rental list and buy 20 cars.
Yep.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%, because they feel like they're caught in a bind, right? Instead of that consistent strategy. So,
Yep.
well, Chris,
Failing to plan is
That's right.
planning to fail.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, I
Absolutely.
wanted to bring, I know, brother, you're, I get a kick out of this when I get a chance to kick back, since I get all the grief about being the elderly challenged one. So, um, Chris, I wanted to make sure that you got an opportunity here I know we're getting close to the end here with Frank, and I hate it, man, because he's bringing the goods again. And I know I personally could go another 3 hours, but none of us have that time frame. But Chris, I want to make sure you had an opportunity, if you had a question or a follow up you wanted to hit Frank with um, uh, today. So
110%.
it's the same. It's the same thing on. It's interesting how what's so interesting about this conversation today is how much the inventory side and the acquisition side align, right? Everything that Frank has addressed from an acquisition side, right? it's the same thing when you're working with a customer online, right? That process should be when they come into the store, right? That should be a seamless process when they come into the store. So it's interesting. That's really what stood out to me today is how those two sides, which they really should, right? Because they're accentuating one another, align so perfectly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Frank, brother, I can't tell you how much Ronaldo, Chris, myself, Brett. Um, I know your time is valuable, my friend, and I can't tell you. And on behalf of our dealer partners, the folks that are listening, the folks that are going to watch and are watching, I can't tell how much we appreciate you spending this 45 minutes with us, absolutely knocking it out of the park on acquisition.
Yes, sir.
If you would, just real quick, I know you addressed it earlier because Chris asked you, but just remind everybody again, your company, how they can get a hold of you, because I know there's going to be some folks that are going to want to reach out to you after watching this. So we want to make sure they can find you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, guys, and always a pleasure to talk acquisitions. It's near and dear to my heart, always has been. But yeah, my company, Unique Auto Solutions, and we have, again, there's the sales side, which is our wholesale arm, and then our sourcing side, which is our vehicle acquisition arm, is there to help source inventory for dealers. You can reach me, on my cell, 224-253-3790, or through email, frank@uasst.net. But again, the strategy, the playbook is right there with LotWalk and what these guys do. The predictor tells you what inventory you need to go out there and source. So building that buy list is super easy with the tools. It's really the challenge has always been going out there and finding the time to go out there and find the inventory, and that's what we can help with.
Frank, thank you so much, my friend. Much success.
Yes, sir.
And I know we'll see you at
Yes, sir.
NADA. Looking forward to catching up. And man, we really appreciate your time. And more importantly, man, the knowledge bombs that you've dropped on us today.
I appreciate it today, guys, and always, and looking forward to NADA and being on the hot seat a little bit. So
awesome. Brother, have a great weekend, and we appreciate you, and we will we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate it.
Hey, man, once again, right? Once again. Hey, listen, what episode are we on?
11.
How do
This is 11.
I don't personally myself, I don't feel like we deserve that's just me, man. We're so fresh at this thing, man, and the opportunities we've had to discuss things with the folks that we've had on, man. What a blessing, man. So, I know Chris, you jumped in and lined that up with Frank, man. Thank you for that, man. That is that was a episode and a half because I know he joined us before, but my goodness, man, what knowledge, right? I wish I would have had that when I was in a store, man, because when he was going through some of that stuff, I'm like, man, I dropped the ball on various areas, right? I thought I was doing really good. Now I realize, man, I dropped the ball a lot, right? So
that being said, we've made it to the top. John, Ronaldo, any final well wishes as we go from week to week, 52 more weeks of the LotTalk podcast? John, any final things for our viewers and listeners today from you, sir?
Listen, Chris, I'm just going to you take this chance to reiterate a little bit of what you say each week, right? And it is, man, I think we truly are blessed to have opportunities to talk to folks like Frank and our dealer partners across the country. And in Canada, can't forget our folks up in the north, right? Yeah. I mean, all this information is just what we want to bring to our fellow automobile industry personnel, right? Is to hopefully, NADA is coming up, and don't forget we're going to be at booth 1219 at NADA. So please stop by, say hi, come and see us. Check out some of our hot seats. They're going to be great, right? We're going to continue this at NADA. But when I think about NADA, when I was a dealer and what I used to do when I went to NADA, I went out there and obviously you get sensory overload, right? There's stuff everywhere, right? But my goal was to bring back one or two actionable things that I could put in play that would help us become better as an operation, right? And that's what I hope ultimately will come out of these, right? Is that we can give one or two morsels to our friends out there in automotive that will help them with their operation through this podcast. So yeah, man, I just appreciate it very much, the opportunity to do
For
this.
sure. Ronaldo, how about you, my friend?
Woo. First off, just kind of follow up with John and how blessed we are to be surrounded by such a powerful mastermind group of individuals that have been involved in this automotive industry and have the experience and the expertise that they share with us on a daily basis. That knowledge transfer is what it is all about, for an industry that has given us all so much to be able to take, conversations like we had today with Frank, and pass that along to dealers that we partner with and guys that are out there just kind of at their wits end, trying to figure out exactly how they're going to change their business and the trajectory of the results that they're getting. Yeah, it is. Ooh, it just I get chills just thinking about it. But I also wanted to remind our listeners and our viewers that if they are going to be at NADA, January the 23rd and through the 26th, right? And if they have an opportunity to come by the booth 1219, we're going to have some of this highly coveted WTF merchandise free for everyone who gets by while supplies last. So want to encourage everybody to come by, say hi, let us know what you think about the podcast, what you think about what we're doing on a daily basis. And give us an opportunity to meet you, greet you, and give you a hug around your neck and figure out a way that we can make your business just a little bit better. 1% every single day is what we're looking for, right?
Absolutely. Well,
Yes,
there
sir.
we go. Another successful episode, episode 11. It's in the books. I'm ready for 51 more episodes in the year 2025.
Yep.
On behalf of John Anderson, Ronaldo Leonard, our entire family at Lotpop, thank you all very much for tuning in. It'll be the same bat time, same bat channel next week. Come check us out. Booth 1219, NADA 2025. I'm Chris Keene. This is LotTalk, powered by Lotpop. Signing off. Talk to you guys soon.